Hello, welcome back to week 4 of our online intermediate English classes. My name is Mr. Nicky. We are carrying on in our Edge textbooks, so we're on Unit 7 Impressions, and this week we are looking specifically at pages 596 to 603. If you don't have your textbooks at home, don't panic. As always, everything that you need will be included in the presentation. Just please do make sure that you have a notebook and a pen nearby so that you can make notes or record anything that you need to. As always, I will be asking you to pause the video and complete some reading work at certain times. Please make sure you do this and equally answer the speaking questions correctly. Writing is going to come at the end of the presentation again today, and that's to be completed in your own time, but will relate to the topic. So, objectives. This week, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to recall and use key vocabulary from page 596. We will also be reviewing some of our previous 2 weeks' vocabulary. You should also be able to analyze 2 styles of text. We're going to be looking at a letter and a poem, and looking at the differences and similarities between them. And then lastly, and this is probably the most important one today, the general aim of the lesson is to be able to understand who Helen Keller was, what she was famous for, and why her work was important. So we are starting off. If you've got your books, this is page 596. And we are going to be looking at the key vocabulary. So, word number 1 this week is anonymous. Anonymous. Someone who is unknown or unidentified. You may have heard of the hacking group Anonymous. They hack into people's computers and try and affect politics and such like. Anonymous, unknown, or unidentified. Word number 2 is conquer. This means to beat or defeat something. We often use it when we're talking about the context of a battle or a war or a fight. To conquer would be to win. Next one, contribute. When we contribute, it means we give something. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing, as in giving somebody money or giving somebody a gift. It could be verbal, or it could be an idea. For example, if you are asked a question in class, or if you put your hand up to volunteer information in class, that would be a contribution to the lesson. You have contributed. Okay? So to give something, it can be physical or verbal. Word number 4 is encouragement. To give encouragement is to give hope, support, and positivity. We try to encourage all the students, and we hope that you also encourage each other. You support, give positive feedback, and try and help and encourage. Next up, imperfection. Imperfection. A mistake or a problem with something would be an imperfection. Number 6, inspire. To inspire somebody is to make somebody want to do or achieve something. We often use this in the context of idols, maybe singers or sports stars or famous people, and they maybe make you want to do the same thing that they've done. You see their success, you like it, you want to try and do the same. So that would be to be inspired. To inspire someone, to make them want to do something. To be inspired is to see something and want to achieve it. Number 7, our second to last, penultimate word, is overcome. Overcome. We're talking in the context of a problem here. It means to solve the problem or to get past it, to overcome. If you are ever ill, you take a medicine and then you overcome the illness, you have solved the problem. You have got past the problem. And last one, unforgettable. Something that cannot leave your mind, or we could also say memorable. Okay, something you are not going to forget. Okay, have a look at those words. If there are any you're unsure of, please give them a quick Google, look at a translate, something like that, so that you make sure you fully understand them. You could try writing your own sentences with them as well. That would be a good suggestion if there are any that you can't remember, if there are any that you think that are difficult, certainly a couple of longer ones today, that might be a way of helping you out. If you're happy with all of those, then we will move on. What you're seeing on screen now, if you've got a book, is page 598. And this is the introduction information about a woman called Helen Keller. I'm going to read through this for you, and then I'm going to ask you to pause the video to do the same. As I'm reading, if you hear any words that you are unfamiliar with, or any words that maybe my pronunciation surprises you a little bit, or it wasn't how you thought it should be said, then you can highlight that and then maybe pause the video, listen to it a few times, and make sure that you're pronouncing that right before moving on to the next page. So Helen Keller, 1880 to 1968. That means she was born in 1880 and she died in 1968. Helen Keller taught the world to respect people who are blind and deaf. Her inspiration came from her own life. When she was a baby, she lost her vision and hearing. The tragedy closed my eyes and ears and plunged me into the unconsciousness of a newborn baby, Helen Keller said. Keller's parents tried many ways to help her. Then, when she was 7, her parents hired a tutor named Anne Sullivan. Sullivan was partially blind and had gone to a school for the blind. She had learned a form of sign language, which she taught to her new pupil. Soon, Keller was using her fingers to spell words, but she didn't understand what the letters meant. All that changed one morning at the water pump. As Keller held one hand under the cold running water, Sullivan spelled W-A-T-E-R into Keller's other hand. Keller suddenly understood. The feeling of running water had turned into a word. On that day, Keller learned 30 words. From then on, her mind raced ahead. She learned to speak when she was 10. When she was 20, she entered college. Later, Helen Keller gave speeches around the world and helped raise money for the American Foundation for the Blind. She received dozens of awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, if you want to read more about Helen Keller or learn a bit more about her, there is lots and lots of stuff online and some videos on YouTube. So you might like to check some of those out before moving on, or indeed after moving on, up to you. I think she's a very interesting woman, so well worth doing a little bit of study about if you have time. So we're going to be looking at 2 texts that were written about Helen Keller. The first of those is a letter which was written to her, and the second is a poem that was written about her. So I'm going to put the letter on screen now. The picture of the chap right above my head up here, there we go. His name is Professor Ernst Papanek. Okay, so he wrote this letter to Helen Keller to thank her for an inspiring visit she made to children in Italy who had been injured during World War II. So this was written on June the 28th, 1965. Dear Helen, in my mind, I can still see you clearly standing for hours, talking to the students and answering their questions. The questions were not always the most intelligent ones. For instance, how can you ride horseback when you can't see where the horse is going? But you gave a wonderful answer. I just hold on to the horse and let him run wherever he wishes. And you and the children had a good laugh over this description. Or when you said that after you had learned to speak, you became a real blabbermouth. It was unforgettable and moving to see you touch the face of a blind child or kiss the face of a crippled one. How your face expressed your feelings and how your love inspired the children to carry on in spite of the huge problems they had to overcome. You pushed them in the direction of a happier life. You were able to lead them because you had conquered your own handicaps and you were concerned with theirs. It doesn't sound good enough when I say this, but thank you for what you did for those children and for all mankind after that terrible war. Many people have found strength, encouragement, and help in your kindness and goodness. Gratefully yours, Ernst Papanek. Okay, so a lovely letter that was written to her there, thanking her for some of the work she had done with children who have similar experiences to her following the war. Now, I don't know if you can quite see underneath the pictures there. The picture on the left of the screen, it says in 1946, Helen Keller began a world tour to raise funds to help blind people. In just 11 years, she traveled to 35 countries. And as you can see, everywhere she went, crowds kind of flocked to her. Very big name. Second picture, again, it's a little bit difficult to see what she's leaning on there, but that's the radio. The radio was a new invention in the early 1900s, and Helen Keller realized how important it could be for blind people. At a speech at the Lions Club, she asked business people to help pay for radios for poor blind children in New York City. So she saw radios as a good way of communicating with blind people, keeping them involved in the community and spreading news, etc. Okay? So you can see she had some interesting ideas and did some very, very interesting things with her life. Now, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and read through that yourself. Again, please do this out loud and maybe try and think a little bit of the tone of the letter. How do you think Ernst Papanek was imagining that this letter would be read? Did he think it should be read like a business letter? Dear Helen, in my mind, I can see you still clearly standing for hours. Or do you think it should be a little bit softer in tone? Okay, so have a little think and try and read it in the style that you think is appropriate. When you restart the video, we will move on to the poem. Okay, moving on to the poem. So we have the poem and the author to the right there is Langston Hughes. Now, quite a nice short poem, not much to read today. She, in the dark, found light, brighter than many ever see. She, within herself, found loveliness through the soul's own mastery. And now the world receives from her dower the message of the strength of inner power. Okay, now at the bottom there it says cultural and historical background. Again, it's a little bit difficult to see, so I will read this for you. In line 10, you'll see the word dower, and I imagine you are not familiar with this. So a dower or a dowry was property that a woman brought her husband when she was married, or indeed the property that a man gave to a woman when he wanted to marry her. Quite an old-fashioned thing. But many cultures have practiced this, and as Helen Keller was never married, he's basically saying that her gift to the world, rather than to an individual through marriage, was the message of strength, or the message of the strength of inner power. Okay. So again, pause the video, read through that yourself. Again, think about the tone that you think the author would like you to read this in. Do you think it should be fast, or do you think it should be slow? Should it have a very static rhythm, or should it be nice and smooth? You have a little think and read it however you think is the most appropriate. When you've finished, we'll move on. Okay, I'm going to put some questions up now. Now, these are not the simplest of questions. I've said that this is speaking. However, I think it might be useful for you to prepare your answers in your notebooks first. So I'm going to read the question, give you a couple of hints or tips. Then please look back through the slides that we've just looked at. You can pause the video to do this, and then come back to give your answer verbally. So, according to Langston Hughes, what gift did Helen Keller contribute to the world, and how did she give this gift? Okay, this is what we just touched upon, her dower. Have a look back at the previous slide, prepare your answer, and then come back to your answer. Okay, if you've completed that, we shall move on to question 2. Who do you think was unforgettable to Helen Keller, and why? So in the letter that's written by Ernst Papanek, he says that Helen Keller was unforgettable to the children. Now, do you think the children were also unforgettable to Helen Keller? Or maybe were there other people who she may have met who would have been unforgettable to her? Have a little think. You could also use information from the previous page, the introduction to Helen Keller. Anne Sullivan, her teacher, might also be somebody you want to think about. So use the text to help you prepare your answer. And once you've finished that, you can move on to the next slide. Number 3, what differences can you see between the two writers' styles? Use examples from the text to support your answer. Now, there should be lots and lots of differences here. One is a poem, one is a letter. One is very short sentences, one has long sentences, one has multiple ideas, one focuses on one single idea. There are lots and lots of things you could talk about stylistically. Okay, so please go back through them. You can use some of the examples that I've just given you, but if you do that, please use examples for the text to support your answer as it states in the question. Again, this one I think is definitely best to prepare in your notebook, and then give the answer verbally once you've finished that. Okay, once you've finished, again, you can move on to the next slide. Okay, vocabulary review. Bit of a long one today, but we're going through all of the words that we've done so far in our online classes. Now, I'm giving the answers verbally again today. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds thinking time to try and recall the word, but not long at all. So try and be as quick as you can with your answers. If there are any that you do not know, that you have forgotten, or that you are unfamiliar with, please practice, write it a few times, try and use it in a sentence, and make sure that's completed before moving on. It's really important that we get this vocab nailed. Word number 1, ashamed. Embarrassed, the opposite of proud. You do something badly, something not good, you would be ashamed. Conscious. Conscious is to do with knowing something is happening. We talked about things happening in school, and knowing they are happening, you are conscious of them. Number 3, desire. Nice and straightforward, desire to want. Number 4, flirt. To flirt is to show that you are attracted to somebody in the way you act and the things you say. Horizon. The horizon is the place where the sky appearingly meets the earth. We sometimes see this when we look out to sea in the very far distance. Privacy, privacy. Remember, there are 2 pronunciations. What does it mean? Okay, we said privacy and privacy, having space to yourself and being able to keep secrets, to have information that only you know. Recover. Recover means to get better, or to return to your original state after something. In some instances, this could be used as a synonym for overcome, which is one of the words we looked at earlier on today. And the last word is reluctant. Reluctant means unwilling or not wanting to do something. Impression. Impression is the thoughts and feelings we have about somebody having met them. Compliment. To compliment somebody is to say something nice about them. Romantic. Romantic describes something that is intended to show love. Romantic dinner, romantic present, romantic gift, romantic words, whatever they might be. Number 4, conceal. To conceal means to hide. Reveal. Reveal is the opposite of conceal. It means to show. Nervous. To be nervous means to be scared or worried about something that will happen in the future. Elegant. Elegance is a type of beauty, often considered upper class, high class. Personality. Personality is the characteristics that make somebody who they are. Final 8 words. These are today's. Anonymous. Anonymous, unknown identity. Conquer. To beat, to defeat. We said often used in the context of a battle or a fight. To contribute means to give, and again, this could be something physical or it could be verbal. Encouragement. Encouragement is giving someone hope, trying to help them do better, make them feel positive. Imperfection, synonymous with a mistake. Inspire. When we inspire someone, we make them want to maybe emulate or do like us. If we are inspired by somebody, it means we want to emulate or be like them, achieve what they have achieved. Overcome. I did mention this earlier. If you look across the other side of the page, we also have the word recover. They can be used as synonyms in certain instances. Overcome, to get better, to get past something, to solve a problem, to fix. And last one, unforgettable. Memorable, difficult to forget. Okay, those are all of our words. I'm sorry, that does take a little bit long to do that, but I hope that you're familiar with those. I hope that none of the answers I gave surprised you at all. If any of them did, like I said, please go and write them down, go and use them in some sentences, find some translations, whatever you need to do to make sure that you understand them fully. Okay, so moving on to writing this week. Now, we have looked at Helen Keller today, who was a famous blind or deaf person. And there are quite a number of people. Helen Keller is maybe special because she fits both of those categories, blind and deaf, which is not very common. However, it is quite common for people to be one or the other. So your task is to research a different blind or deaf person. They only need to be one. And then I want you to compare their work and the impact that they have had with Helen Keller's impact. Okay. Now, structure-wise, I'm just going to give you a few pointers. I think 4 paragraphs is correct. We're looking at 300 words maximum. So in an introduction, you should explain what your topic is. So you could say something like, in this essay, I am going to compare whoever your person is with Helen Keller, another famous blind deaf person. Okay, that way you just introduce what your topic's going to be. That's generally how you are required to write in academic writing, academic essays, especially when you get to university. The introduction really is to outline what's going to happen in the essay. You could even go to the detail of saying what you will put in each paragraph. First, I will talk about Helen Keller, and then I will talk about whoever your other person is. And in the conclusion, I will explain who I think has had the biggest impact. For example, okay? So something like that would be fine. So the structure I've suggested, what the topic is: paragraph 1, what you know or what you have learned about Helen Keller. Paragraph 2, what you know or what you have learned about your other person. And then your conclusion. So have some similarities between the two. Did their work overlap? Have they had a similar impact? Any differences? Is there some things that one person did and the other didn't? Do you think one person was more successful than the others? And a final thought: did you find them inspiring? Or do you think that they could have done more? It's possible. Both of those are possible. Okay, so have a nice think. Do a good bit of research. I think this is quite a nice research task. Hopefully it's quite inspiring. Once you have completed your writing, please email it to your English teacher and they will mark it and provide you with feedback. Other than that, we are going to finish there for today. Thank you very much for concentrating through that. Objective review. Were you able to recall and use the key vocabulary from page 596? Hopefully. Were you able to analyze the two styles of text? If you answered the 3 questions, then the answer to that is yes. And are you now able to explain who Helen Keller was, what she was famous for, and why her work was important? If so, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for taking part again. I will see you next week. Goodbye.